Hey everybody, Icycat here. This operator profile is going to take a closer look at the new US Navy SEAL attacker, BLACKBEARD. His deployable rifle shield can give him the edge in a firefight. But what are the best ways to use it, and how do you counter him? Let's take a closer look at BLACKBEARD next. BLACKBEARD is a US Navy SEAL and the newest member of the attacking team that's been added to Siege with the Dustline Season 2 content. His choice of primaries are the MK17, otherwise known as the SCAR assault rifle. This does pretty good damage, but it has a slightly lower rate of fire than others, and it definitely has a little bit lower ammo capacity with right around 20 rounds. Recoil is average to moderate, but by putting on some barrel attachments like a silencer or a compensator or something like that, you can make that a little bit more manageable as well. His alternate primary is the SR-25 marksman rifle. It has good first shot accuracy, but you do have that slow rate of fire with high recoil to work with. Speaking of high recoil, his secondary weapon is the 50 caliber Action Express Desert Eagle handgun. And this weapon does kick like a horse. If you are firing this by spamming the trigger, your shots are going to rapidly climb into the ceiling. It just has an insane amount of kick. It has very high damage, but very low ammunition capacity. His choice of secondary is going to be either flashbangs or breaching charges. Both are pretty viable, so go with whichever one makes you feel more comfortable. BLACKBEARD's special ability is the deployable rifle shield. So this is something that attaches to the front of the gun, and it creates sort of a bulletproof glass covering that is completely transparent. You can see through it. Incoming bullets will create those impact rounds that you would get similar to the shield operators. For instance, if you shoot at Blitz and you see the way his visor gets those impact marks on them from being hit, the same thing will happen with BLACKBEARD's shield. And it'll take a lot of damage before it breaks, but it does break. Now, last week I did my first impression video on BLACKBEARD. I had gone to Cologne, Germany. I was allowed to preview the operator for the first time ahead of the general public release, and I got a chance to play it there. And at that time, I had said that the shield doesn't break. And I had some people in the comments jump all over me like I didn't know what I was talking about, because when they played as BLACKBEARD, the shield did break. Here's the thing, guys. I was playing a preview build of the operator. At that time, it didn't break. We tested it out. We took Tachanka and we fired, we went through 2 magazines on his turret. That's, 60 rounds of ammo, and his shield never broke. We fired shotguns at it. It never broke. So for those of you that were saying, I was crazy and I didn't know what I was talking about, trust me, guys, I tested this at the time. It didn't. Now it does. So what does that look like? Well, most Defender submachine guns will take right around a full magazine to shatter the shield. Other weapons like the shotgun can do a lot more damage at close range. It takes a few shotgun hits, 2, 3, maybe 4 tops to shatter it. Of course, the further out you are, then the more the spread of the shotgun will kind of make that take more, but up close, a shotgun will punch through it pretty rapidly. The shield really doesn't appear to be destroyable in Terrorist Hunt that has some different rules set up for it. We emptied 3 magazines of ammunition into it, and it took the impact damage, but it never actually shattered. So it plays by slightly different rules in Terrorist Hunt than it does in the player versus player mode. Some of the other weapons in the game will take a little bit less. Tachanka's turret is about 8 or so rounds to destroy the shield, and that's very good. That's, I think, about where that needs to be. Here's the thing. Yes, his shield can be broken, but it happens so rarely. How many times do you get 30 consecutive shots off on a target and then it breaks before it impacts the rest of the round? I mean, that just doesn't happen very often. You have to remember, unlike a shield operator, you can pump rounds into a shield operator all day and they've got that little pistol. But BLACKBEARD has a fully automatic assault rifle or the SR-25 marksman rifle, but either way, these are way more accurate than those hip-fired pistols that the shield users have, and they have a lot more just general firepower, especially with the rate of fire on the SCAR, or the MK17, as the game calls it. On one hand, he's like a shield operator, on another hand, he's a whole lot more dangerous. Now that's talking about punching through his shield. Obviously, you're going to want to go for body shots on him, and what makes this challenging is that a lot of us have been trained by this point, the game's been out for 5 or 6 months, to go for headshots. That, if you hit him in the head, they go down fast, and of course, this protects his head. It is possible if you get just the right, there's a couple of pixels that stick up above the head, so you can sometimes, occasionally get a lucky random headshot on him. but it's a very difficult thing to intentionally aim for. But anyway, so we're trained to go for these headshots, and now he's kind of mixed that up to where you have to go for body shots instead. One thing you can do as Blackbeard to kind of counter that is if you walk around crouched, you're going to be able to kind of reduce that profile of how much of your body is exposed. And if you're leaning as you come around corners, you can also further reduce that profile. So there's a lot that you can control on that. He's great for plugging up a murder hole. If somebody opens one up, he can stand there with his shield and fire through it. And while you can get hit by rounds penetrating the material that's below the shield, most people will fire at the hole that they see with the operator firing through the hole, and they'll not think to fire lower than that. Another thing that can work in his favor is he can control doors, but especially windows. Like, especially if you're on an inverted rappel, you're upside down in the window, you don't have to expose much more of your body than just what the shield is. And now you can pretty much control that room. As a defender, the way that you deal with that is you can try to find a very steep angle, and you can kind of shoot it along the side of the shield. You can try to find that angle. You can throw a nitro cell, or you can actually exit the structure and try to flank him while he's on the rappel and get him that way. But otherwise, he's very formidable when he's on a window rappel. Even if he's not inverted, and he's just like on the bottom and sort of creeping up a little bit, he can show enough that he can fire his gun, but not expose the area of his body below the shield, and that can make him pretty hard to deal with. Same thing for coming up the top of stairs. He can only come so high, and then you'll only see the shield to sort of shoot at. Overall, he's just a very powerful character in that regard. Something that makes him even more powerful is that when his rifle shield is deployed, he's actually more accurate in a way. He gets a little bit more horizontal recoil, but his vertical recoil is so much more centered. I showed this clip during my first impression video last week, but it's worth showing here again. You can see how the vertical recoil goes all the way up, but then when you put that deployable shield on, it's now much more clustered into a smaller grouping, and there's a little bit more horizontal sway going on, but the vertical control is just way more centered. And I'll just show this here too, so you can see it with the penetration instead of just the bullet holes, is that the same thing is going on. We have a much tighter cluster of a grouping here, and that can be a significant advantage for sure. And to an extent, that makes sense. The extra weight on the front of the barrel will kind of help the recoil from climbing upward. The only real disadvantage you have for keeping this on at all times is that he moves much more slowly. He's a medium armor character, but he moves like a heavy when the rifle shield is deployed. Now, for some reason, when he puts it in his back pocket or wherever he puts it, he moves faster again. Or if you switch to his pistol, he moves faster again. So I don't know how we're accounting for that weight slowing him down now, but otherwise there's not a whole lot of reason that you wouldn't just run around with him on the shield at all times. As long as you can live with the slower movement speed, there's no reason really not to. Blackbeard can also be very powerful if you combine him with a shield operator. If you've got somebody in front of you like Blitz and they're crouched down and they're moving forward, then you get behind them, you can shoot over the top of them or, kind of like lean out to the side or whatever. And now you have a very formidable combination. And while the two of you could be taken out very easily by a single nitro cell toss, the two of you can also room clear pretty effectively too. So it's sort of like this high risk, high reward trade-off of how you might want to play that. If he's paired with, like, for instance, Montaigne, who does not have the ability to set a breaching charge, he can put that on, let the shield user go in first after the charge is detonated, and he can sort of be like that invincible wall for Blackbeard, and he can just kind of, peek out the side and have the cover of that invincible shield in front of him, and then have the deployable shield covering his face additionally, and it's like, wow, that's pretty hard to deal with. But as I said, you do open yourself up for a 2-for-1 kill with a nitro cell toss. Another good way to use them is for partial and full breaches on the floor when you're looking down into an area below you. So if you blow open a trapdoor and you're crouched and you have your rifle shield deployed, you can peek those trapdoors and not worry a whole lot about incoming fire taking them out. Likewise for partial breaches, when you're firing in between the gaps in the floorboards, you've got that protection that will help keep you alive if you get any rounds coming up from below. And that can really kind of control a zone of fire for him and keep the team pinned down in a certain area while the rest of his unit moves in from another side. And that's a real strength for him. He can pair up with somebody, or he can sort of go off on his own and be like this element of distraction in its own right. Overall, my personal opinion on Blackbeard is a little mixed. I really like both of his primary weapons. They're a lot of fun to use. I do wish there was a little bit more downside to using his gadget though. Moving at a slower speed doesn't seem to be enough of a hindrance to prevent me from using it. Furthermore, having the shield be breakable is something that just doesn't happen often enough. It barely ever happens in player versus player. You would have to take so many rounds, or, yes, you can get in that situation where you're at a shotgun, point blank range, but it doesn't happen often enough to be something that's like, oh, I'm not going to run with this because I'm slower now. And then you get the bonus to your accuracy, and honestly, I keep the rifle shield off until I get to the structure so I can move in faster, and then once I'm at the structure, it's on, and it pretty much just stays on with no real incentive to ever take it off. Does that make him overpowered? In certain ways, yes. In certain other ways, it creates new ways for the defense to think about how to approach handling him. They have to use more flanking. They have to use things like nitro cells. They have to train themselves to not go for the headshots and go more for the body shots in his case. And it definitely does add some new dynamics into how these firefights unfold. But that said, I'd still like to see a little bit more in the way of negatives for using the shield at all times. He's got the advantages of being like half of a shield user, but none of the disadvantages because he doesn't have that hip fire pistol to work with. He's got a fully automatic rifle or a really powerful marksman rifle. Well, that wraps up our in-depth operator profile on BLACKBEARD. To stay up to date on all the latest news and information from Rainbow Six Siege, please like and subscribe. You can also follow IcyCat25 on either Facebook or Twitter. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.